A bit frosty in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice.
Britain's Newsroom on GB News, weekdays 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Saturday night, and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes, along with Matthew Lesh, Dr. Renee Holdecamp, Ben Leo, and Benjamin Butterworth as ever. It's 6 p.m, and this is the Saturday 5. A very warm welcome. Now, the premise of the show, I'm sure regular viewers are aware by now, but it's pretty simple. Each host gets 60 seconds to outline an argument about a chosen topic, then we all pile in and the fur starts to fly. But of course, we want to know your views, much more important than ours. Send your views and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/yoursay. And folks, before we get into it and start tearing each other apart, it's time for your Saturday night news.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your headlines. Nigel Farage has been criticised by the Prime Minister and the Labour leader over his comments suggesting the West provoked Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Rishi Sunak says it was completely wrong. The Reform UK leader made the claim during an interview with the BBC's Nick Robinson last night. Mr Farage said the expansion of the EU and NATO gave Putin a reason to tell the Russian people they're coming after us again. The Prime Minister says the comments play into the Russian president's hands, which the Labour leader has echoed.
Farage's comments about Russia and Ukraine are disgraceful. I've always been clear that Putin bears responsibility, sole responsibility, for the Russian aggression in Ukraine. And we have always stood behind Ukraine and supported Ukraine. And so far, we've done it united across Parliament. I've made it my business to ensure that the opposition stood with the government on this issue. So seriously did we take it. And, of course, with our NATO allies.
Now, the Conservatives say they're going to focus on the nighttime economy in the first 100 days of government and secure the future of Britain's pubs, bars, restaurants and music venues. The Tory party says a comprehensive review would be launched to look at licensing laws, planning rules and other enforcement they say is holding back growth. It says the sector was disproportionately impacted by the COVID pandemic and the war in Ukraine, which drove up food, drink and energy prices. Rishi Sunak says representatives for bars, pubs and music venues deserve more support for the work they put into serving local communities.
It's right that they get the support they need. They've been let down by Labour, whether that's here in London, where those types of venues are closing at a rapid rate with multiple job losses, or indeed in Wales, where Labour is hiking up their taxes. A Conservative government will support all those venues to make sure that they can continue creating jobs and drive our economy forward and continue providing an enormous amount of enjoyment in our local communities.
The Scottish Greens have urged the next UK government to lift the block on Scotland's controversial gender reforms. The proposed legislation would make it easier for people to legally change their gender, but UK ministers blocked the draft law, saying it would conflict with the Equality Act protections applying across Great Britain. Scotland's First Minister John Swinney said he agreed with the Scottish Green Party.
Scottish Parliament has legislated for the changes on gender recognition, and I think it's important the democratic wishes of the Scottish Parliament are respected. But clearly there is a legal issue that's got to be addressed, and that can only be addressed by the United Kingdom Government. But I want the legislation that's been passed by the Scottish Parliament to be put into effect.
Now, Labour's pledging to put water companies under special measures as over 10,000 people have been hospitalised due to waterborne diseases under the Conservatives' rule. Labour say they'll give the water regulator powers to block the payment of any bonuses to polluting water bosses until they've, quote, cleaned up their filth. They've also vowed to make water bosses who continue to oversee law-breaking face criminal charges, as well as end self-monitoring and force all companies to accept independent monitoring to stop companies covering up illegal sewage dumping. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats are setting out a plan to save chalk streams from environmental disaster. It comes as analysis by the party found over 48,500 hours worth of sewage was discharged into chalk streams last year. That's more than double the previous year. The proposals would see a public consultation launched within the first 100 days of a Lib Dem government, in which rivers and lakes could be awarded new blue flag status to protect them from sewage dumping. In other news, pro-Palestinian protesters have sprayed red paint on a historic building at the University of Cambridge. Students and members of the Palestine Action Group targeted Senate House this afternoon, a building that's been used for graduation ceremonies since the 18th century. The group says the action marked the end of an academic year where the University of Cambridge has funded, enabled and normalised the ongoing Palestinian genocide. A spokesman for the university said they strongly condemned this act of vandalism. And the Prince of Wales has thanked Taylor Swift for a great concert as he shared a photo of the pop superstar taking a selfie with him and his children, Prince George and Princess Charlotte. Watching the US singer perform at Wembley Stadium, Prince William was also spotted shaking his arms to shake it off as he celebrated his 42nd birthday. Swift posted her selfie with Prince William, George and Charlotte alongside her boyfriend, NFL star Travis Kelce. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Saturday 5.
Thanks very much, Sophia. It's Saturday night, folks, and you're with the Saturday 5. Thank you very much for your company. I'm Darren Grimes, and I can promise that you're in for a very lively hour. We are, as you can probably tell, in a different studio. Now, Stephen on GB Views has just commented saying, have we not paid the bills on the other place? It's not that, Stephen. It's being renovated. I promise we'll be back there next weekend because the aircon in here is pretty significant.
It's a bit nippy.
Ben was just saying he's got icicles from his breasts now. So we're going to crack on with tonight's first debate. I'm going to kick us off in abused position of the chair. I want to talk about J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling has made a significant intervention, being the Harry Potter author, of course. She's made an intervention in the general election debate, saying that as a former Labour Party member and voter, she would struggle to give the party her support right now. And it's for one reason and one reason only. J.K. Rowling perceives the Labour Party to have abandoned women and their struggle for, well, the advancements of sex-based rights. Let's have a watch at this clip.
I think it's very important in all political debate that we treat all views with respect and all people with dignity. And that's what I've tried to do throughout this. I'm very proud of the progress that we've made as a Labour Party, as Labour governments in the past when it comes to women's rights. I'm conscious that the battle on women's rights is never over. We need to make further progress in this country, and I hope if we're able to win the general election, we will do so. But what I want to do is to ensure that we make that progress by persuading people to vote Labour at the general election, turn their back on this government, usher in a Labour government to rebuild the country, but also use it as a reset moment where we can bring the country together and ensure that all debate is done in the respectful way that I think everybody wants. And so I think there's a real opportunity here now to make some progress.
Oh dear, I don't know what someone typed into some AI chatbot to get that response, because I tell you what, I'm absolutely sick of the way in which politicians like Rosie Duffield in the Labour Party have been well and truly thrown under the bus by Sir Keir and prominent members of that particular party. I think it's a damn disgrace, and frankly, I think J.K. Rowling is making some pretty serious and pretty sensible points. Now, Renee, you are the honorary woman on the panel.
Why, thank you.
Do you think J.K. Rowling has a point?
Absolutely, 100%. And I'm so pleased that she continues to stand up for women, because she doesn't have to do that. She could sit back, be quiet, and not take the flack that she gets for this. I'm tired of the argument that this affects a tiny number of people. Yes, it is a tiny number of trans people who might go into a single-sex space, who might abuse a woman when they're actually a man. But it doesn't matter. When we've got unisex toilets as a result of that in schools, and young girls are getting assaulted, then it's a massive problem. We have to look at this debate properly, and we should be very, very worried about Labour's stance on this. They have got backbenchers who are going to push them hard to roll back on all of the progress we've made to actually get this put back in the box.
And do you think they have been pretty weak, supine, invertebrate, jellyfish? When it comes to Rosie Duffield especially,
yes,
and actually ensuring she has protection from harassment and all the rest of it.
I don't know why Rosie Duffield stays in the party. She should defect somewhere where they're going to actually respect her views and look after her. She'd be fine in the Tories, because they're almost Labour anyway, but at least they do know that women need protecting.
Benjamin, I assume you'd be saying, well, sling your ook, Rosie Duffield, you bigot.
Not a quote. Well, look, clearly, you know, the Labour Party hasn't dealt with Rosie Duffield badly, because she's chosen to be a Labour MP. She's campaigning for Keir Starmer to be Prime Minister. I watched an interview with her only last weekend where she talked about why she wants Keir Starmer in a Labour government. She's also a Labour candidate in the election. And so, you know, I think the idea that they've treated her badly is an exaggeration. You know, recently a Labour member of the House of Lords made an inappropriate comment and he lost the whip within a couple of hours. Well, that's much better action than you've seen on similar things in the Tory party.
And that was Lord Cashman who said she was frit or lazy for not holding hustings whilst she gets abuse, threats and all the rest of it.
Indeed, he lost the whip just hours later, and I think it was a Sunday as well, so clearly they were taking it seriously.
But the point is, though, Benjamin, that Sir Keir Starmer on Thursday night during the BBC Question Time debate said that actually there was toxicity around Rosie Duffield's comments that she had made on women being the only ones to have a cervix. Now, it doesn't strike me as an especially toxic thing for someone to argue.
But there are people who want this debate to be a fight. They want more heat than light. And I think Keir Starmer's absolutely right to say that we shouldn't aim for that, because nobody gains from that. You know, for a start, we don't have unisex toilets because of transgender questions. You know, most buildings have unisex toilets and do it because of space issues.
That's just not true. Schools have actually, who are completely on board with the transgender ideology, have changed their toilets from single-sex spaces into unisex spaces to satisfy that.
No, I don't think that's true at all.
It's totally
I don't think that's true at all. And also, I definitely don't think you should have unisex toilets. I think it's unnecessary in a school, let alone anywhere else. And, you know, I just think it's nonsense to try and claim that schools across the country are forcing boys and girls into the same private loos or changing rooms. Well, it's complete fabrication.
Ben, you're a dad. Do you worry about what the Labour Party will do policy-wise on these kinds of topics within schools, for example?
I do, and funnily enough, 2 days ago I went to visit my 4-year-old's soon-to-be school. He started school in September, and it's a Church of England school. We're not particularly religious, but one thing I am happy about, that because it is a C of E school, I'm hoping, and I understand I'm getting these messages from the teachers that we met and the workers at the school who we met on that occasion 2 days ago, that those children will be protected from this kind of ideology. You know, it is an ideology. I agree with you, Renee.
Protected from what? What is it that you think happens?
Well, I don't want my child going into a classroom plastered with trans flags, for example. I went into my bank the other day to Barclays. I don't care who you sleep with or whatever you do in your own time. I don't want to go into a bank and see trans flags everywhere.
Mate, a flag is not going to hurt you anyway. It's just a
flag.
I don't want my... It's not just a flag. It's not, is it? It's not
just
a flag.
It has a political meaning to it, but like a flag is not something that's going to endanger or cause any risk to anyone. I completely understand and have a lot of sympathy for the point about women's sports and women's spaces. There's nothing violent about a flag. It's a flag. A business can put up a flag.
But we're not talking about the flag. We're talking about the ideology that the flag presents.
Let's step back. What do we actually want here? Because I read J.K. Rowling's piece this morning in The Times. Very well written, very persuasive. I think she makes a lot of important points about women's rights. It's not entirely clear to me, though, what actually Keir Starmer said wrong. So what if you actually look at what he said you should treat people with respect and dignity about their views. He said the debate had become toxic. He didn't actually say that Rosie Duffield's comments were toxic. He said the debate had been toxic. But he has said that in the past. Indeed, he has said that in the past, but she's shifted his position. He won't admit this, but he's definitely shifted his position. I think J.K. Rowling's actually won the debate here in a very large sense, including with Keir Starmer, where they're very scared to just do anything.
The problem with Keir Starmer is he says that, well, I've listened to what Tony Blair said, and Tony said that men have penises and women have vaginas. So, yeah, I think I'll agree with Tony Blair that I agree with that.
It's not true. It is true. He actually
moved his position long before Tony Blair's comments. He moved his position a year to 2 years ago, so it's got nothing to do with Tony Blair's recent comments.
He basically said, oh, Uncle Tony said it, so it's fine now.
Well, he was asked a question, I think, and he gave the answer. Look, people are trying to fearmonger and have a moral panic about the existence of trans people. Having a pride flag in a school is not doing any damage to kids. But what it might do, a job of a school is to educate people to the ways of the world. And if you were to deny them knowing that these things exist, then you would be failing as a school.
Benjamin, I don't want my 4, 5, 6-year-old child knowing about heterosexual relationships, let alone trans or gay. I don't want. Let them be children.
I take it that you don't read to your child in that case, because pretty much
I don't read my child books on
every
sex,
children's book or any Disney film is almost in every case about a heterosexual love story.
I'm sure Disney's right down that.
If you don't think they should know about romantic relationships, then you're going to have to.
Well, they turn on Netflix and they'll see everything, all of these LGBT themes.
Right. So you agree?
All right.
So you agree with that?
Okay.
Relationships isn't the same as explaining the mechanics of biology.
Right.
I don't want to know who you sleep with.
Now we're going to move on. We're going to move on. We've got a debut from Matthew Lesh.
Thank you very much, Happy. It's a pleasure to join. Long-time listener, first-time participant, I guess. Look, this campaign, the Labor Party has repeatedly denied any suggestion, any whisper there might be some secret plans to increase taxes. I think after today's front page in The Guardian, they're going to find that a lot more difficult. The Guardian's reporting, according to sources, senior sources within the Labor Party, and it's worth remembering here the Guardian is a left-wing paper well connected to the Labor Party. They are reporting that there are plans afoot, there are policy papers going around about putting up capital gains tax in a way to increase 10 billion additional pounds, plans to change around inheritance tax, to put it on agricultural land, as well as removing certain business relief. And this, I think, raises some important questions, because we know that there's a bit of an unspoken truth. There's a bit of a black hole in Labour's financial plans, because on the one hand, they say they're not going to do any cuts. On the other hand, though, under the existing plans, if they don't do anything, there are £20 billion of cuts planned to departmental budgets. We also know that Labour Party have said, we're not, in their manifesto, we're not going to raise VAT, we're not going to raise national insurance, we're not going to raise income tax, but they haven't said they're not going to raise taxes at all. So that actually does leave quite a lot open. So I suppose the question here is, why, if there are plans afoot to raise taxes, are Labor not being honest about it prior to the election? Are they going to try to surprise us with some emergency budget after the election? What are their real kind of underlying intentions, rather than what they're kind of saying to get elected here today? And I think that that's so important in the midst of an election campaign where Labor is so far ahead, where perhaps they actually could be truthful and they could put forward they could be honest with people and say, well, we want to increase spending and therefore we're going to put up your taxes. But they're refusing to do that. I suppose that this is really in some sense about trust, Benjamin, but I guess maybe someone coming from more the left side, you might say, we should put up these taxes, we should put up spending, that's entirely justified. Should they be more, I suppose, honest and open about this?
Well, if you go back to 2017, when Theresa May decided to be very open about her plans for funding social care, and it collapsed the public support. So I actually think, as a population, we're rather hypocritical in that we say, we want you to tell us what you're going to do, but then if politicians tell you what they're going to do, everyone says, oh, well, I'm not voting for that. Well, then you end up with a situation where politicians of any party are stuck in a corner with this. Now, Labour's manifesto has the smallest public spending plans. I think it's something like net of 6 billion more or something, which is less than the Tories and vastly less than the Green Party or Reform, which are pledging more than £120 billion of extra spending or cuts. So, completely far article. Now, you're right, there's a £19 billion gap in the sums, which says there'll have to be cuts of that description. But I don't think it's unique to the Labour Party to ask the question of how they're going to fund that. That same gap applies to the Tory plans. In fact, it's slightly bigger because they want to spend a bit more money in their manifesto.
But does anyone have any confidence whatsoever that Labour will actually stick to those parameters that they've set out in their manifesto?
Can I just point out that taxes were lower under the last Labour government? Income tax was lower the entire time we had a Labour government than it has been under the Tories.
Since then we locked down 3 times.
Yeah, but long before COVID came along, taxes were higher under the Tories than they were under Labour. And the only 2 occasions in the last 30 years VAT has gone up were both under Conservative governments.
But Benjamin, can I just pick up one thing? You've said there that if they're honest, the public go, oh, I'm not going to vote for you. But actually, the left tell us all the time that when we poll the public, they're more than happy to put an extra penny on the income tax to save the NHS. So those two things don't sit by side either.
Well, they don't, because, you know, when people answer questions in a poll, for example, they're not thinking in a holistic way. It's the same reason why, you know, Jeremy Corbyn will tell you that he had lots of policies that were popular individually, but when people look at them as a package, they think, well, you can't actually do it. I think you're seeing that with the Tories approach. They keep saying they'll do all sorts of things, but no one believes them, and so it doesn't matter.
But the problem with Keir is he does keep saying, you're right, I'm not going to raise income tax, you know, national insurance and all of that on working people with a very fine definition of what a working person is. But I listened to him the other night, and actually, when he was talking at great length in the Leader's individual interview, he said, what I'm not going to do is write the budget for the next 5 years. That's what he said. There's the answer.
Would it not be wise, actually, for Labour to not make any of these commitments about even VAT or national insurance or income tax, and not say that they have any specific plans to not raise taxes, and not try to give the impression they're not raising taxes? Because in some ways, actually, the problem is, if you completely rule out raising the 3 biggest sources of revenue, and they've actually said they're going to freeze corporate tax as well on top of that, then you have to start raising these other taxes that actually cause more economic problems. The reason why capital gains tax is low is you want to encourage investment. So if you start putting up capital gains a lot, then you can discourage investment.
Capital gains tax isn't even low in this country. I mean, it's akin to theft. There's a report out from Headley and Partners this week saying the UK is set to lose 9.5 million millionaires this year, second only to China, because they are so fearful about the incoming Labour government.
I mean, that's just nonsense.
What's nonsense?
Right, the idea that it's like, you know, there are some private schools that closed. They tried to say, oh, it's Labour's VAT on school fees plans, even though, you know, I think hundreds of private schools have closed in the last 14 years.
The question is, how much can you keep
people aren't leaving this country because they think Labour will put their taxes up. People that have big investments and big money have been far more likely to leave the country because it's not a worthwhile place to invest in businesses. It's been a poor environment. And Liz Truss was the epitome of that.
You might be right, but if
no millionaire, or more importantly billionaire, because there are quite a lot of millionaires, no billionaire is going to stop being in Britain if they think they're going to make money out of the economy. The economy being mediocre is what will get them to leave.
If they think their taxes are going
up,
then they're not
loads of
going to
people
make
have been
money.
leaving the UK for years in order to set up business in other places. If you know you're about to sell your company, you relocate to Singapore, where you're not going to have to pay tax on it, and you make millions and millions more. It's a very simple calculation here, and more people will leave as you try and squeeze them.
You are right, nothing works, and the economic environment isn't great, but at the same time, when you add increased capital gains tax, for example, on top of that, why would anyone stick around? You just go to Dubai, you go to the Middle East, you go to Qatar, where the sun shines, life is arguably better, they can probably get a train on time.
I kind of feel with that argument, Benjamin, you're almost there, you're almost with us, and then you say, but it's not Labour's fault. Well, it is. It's the fear of Labour and their tax and spending problems that are putting people off.
People haven't been leaving the country for months because of, you know, a Labour government coming in. People don't think like that. And also, I might point out...
How many millionaires do you know?
Well, lots, because I live in London, so most people that own a house could well be a millionaire in a hit.
No, proper millionaires, not just with equity in a house.
That's not how you define a millionaire.
I know probably half a dozen millionaires, at least 3 of them are moving to Dubai because they don't be taxed to the hill.
But people, you know, middle-class people, let alone people who are poor and at the bottom, have had a really tough time. And the idea that your primary sympathy should be with millionaires moving to knock 5% off their tax by basing themselves in Singapore,
you're saying the middle classes have had a really hard time.
Regular folk can't even afford to feed their kids at points in the last couple of years because bills have been extortionate.
I would agree the middle classes have had a really hard time, but they've shown what they're going to do to the middle classes by kicking private schools and independent schools. By the way,
middle-class people aren't going to private schools, they're upper middle class, they are a lot richer than the average.
people who are middle class who send their kids to private schools, actually.
Do you have £60,000 spare a year for 2 kids to go to private school?
I do not, but there are
everybody
people...
has 2 kids.
Yeah,
Benjamin,
exactly.
a typical family has 2 kids.
No.
And the average private school fee is £15,500. These are not Middle England, and these are not people that I think a government should be worrying about first.
When I sent my son to private school, I lived on apples and yoghurt for a year because I couldn't afford anything but his school fees and
I've heard many stories. Parents remortgaging their houses.
Look, that illustrates the problem. You think you're hard done by because you had to have less food. But the vast majority of people in this country, there is no amount of apples and yoghurt they could live off that would give them £15,500 spare for private school fees.
OK, we're going to have to leave that there.
You're not the squeezed middle, and those should not be the people that a government worries about.
Yes, you are.
No,
Class
you are
warfare, Benjamin Butterworth strikes again. But still to come tonight, Nigel Farage has repeated a claim that the West provoked Russia in invading Ukraine. We'll debate that topic. I know people on the GB Views are very keen for a discussion on that. Is the cult of the NHS a real thing? And we'll ask why young people need to go out and make their own money instead of relying on inheritance. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
History lecturers at the University of Liverpool have been advised to problematise whiteness and heterosexuality in their seminars. They are saying that you should be guilty if you're white and heterosexual. Not using the long words they use, but that's kind of what they're saying.
Yeah, but do you know what? History in this country is concerned with more and has been lived by more white people and more heterosexuals, right? And that's the history. I'll tell you something else, Dawn. This is Russell Group University material here. This is Liverpool. It's a really good university. Mm-hmm. The thing that really got me going apart from this, and I thought it was an AI generation of words input into a system to come up with from something. It's ridiculous. The main issue I have is the verb problematise. I've never heard of that before. Yeah. So they should be prioritising grammar. Let's get first principles back in there firstly.
It's just promoting anti-racism.
It's not, Amy.
It is. Wait. It's just bringing the marginalised voices into the discussion. So
no, what they're saying is look at British history through the optic of
all perspectives. So let's look at it from the perspective of a queer person growing up. Let's look at it from the perspective of somebody from...
But that's not the majority.
When I actually looked at the evidence, it's all about unpacking bias. And you have to admit there has been a white bias in history.
No, there hasn't, because the facts...
From a white perspective...
Amy, the facts are, in history, most people in this country are white and heterosexual.
Of course, but then there's still...
So that's the history.
...voices that deserve to be brought into the discussion as much as the dominant...
Look,
like, that's all decolonising the curriculum is hearing all sides of the argument. Which surely we at GB News love. We celebrate that. That's what we do.
We do, but we're not telling anybody it's bad to be white or it's bad to be...
Exactly.
That is not what...
Amy, it is. It is.
The People's Channel. Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. As always, thank you very much for all of your emails about tonight's topics and your messages on GB Views. Ian has written in and Ian says, shall we just accept and rejoice that Sakir has finally figured out what a woman is? It's taken him until the tender age of 61. Michael says, if a trans woman is a woman and a trans man is a man, Darren, could you ask Benjamin if, as a gay man, he would date a trans man?
Well, who you want to date is entirely your own feeling.
Well, answer the question.
No, it's got nothing to do with...
Answer the question.
Well, I don't...
would you date a trans man?
I have no objection to it, but what I'm saying is if somebody said the answer was no, that's fine, because, you know, people are attracted to particular types of men or women or whatever.
Well, that's not what the activists say.
Anyone who'd say yes to
the activists say that's transphobia.
I think the question would be the other way round. Would they date me?
Labour, Charlotte says, Labour are only pledging not to raise taxes on your income. Yeah, I bet everything else will be fair game. That's what Matthew fears. And then Rod has written in, and Rod says, hi, why are left-wing spokespeople and politicians always replying to possible tax rises by saying, well, when the Tories. Now, though, it's time for our next debate. Who wants to go next?
Well, unfortunately, it's me.
Uh-oh.
So, Nigel Farage of this parish has been speaking in the last day or two about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And he has said that the West provoked Russia into the invasion because of its activities with NATO creeping eastwards. Now, he's been condemned widely. He's been called a disgrace by Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, and Rishi Sunak has also condemned his comments, but he's refusing to apologise. Now, I think that for a man that likes to parrot the lines of Churchill, he sounds a lot more like Neville Chamberlain trying to blame us for defending Ukraine. Now, Darren...
We've provoked this war. It's, of course it's his fault. He's used what we've done as an excuse. But we provoked the invasion of Ukraine. Yes, and very interestingly, once again, 10 years ago when I predicted this, by the way, I'm the only person in British politics that predicted what would happen. And, of course, everyone said I was a pariah for daring to suggest it. George Robertson, former Labour cabinet minister, who went on to become the Secretary-General of NATO, has in the last couple of weeks said the war is a direct result of EU expansionism.
A great advocate for Nigel Farage's politics. Do you not think that this is deeply out of line with standing up for Britain and standing up for the West's interests?
I don't at all, and frankly, I'm sick of seeing that clip played every hour on the hour.
So you think Putin invaded Russia because of what we and our allies did?
I think I would listen to what Nigel Farage actually said, because I watched the full interview, and he said he disliked President Putin, and President Putin had actually been responsible for causing the war itself. I don't see how any part of what he said was part of apologism.
Through actions of NATO.
Well, we did break our promises to Putin. We promised that all of these countries around him... Let me finish, please. All these countries around him wouldn't be allowed to join NATO. They did. We didn't allow Putin to join NATO. Perhaps we should have done and kept our enemies close. All Nigel said was that we provoked him. He clearly said it was Putin's fault. He clearly said he wasn't a supporter of Putin. This is being used as a tool against Farage because everyone's scared of him.
He's doing so well, and people like you are so terrified by Nigel actually doing so well, and he's taken a lot of Labour votes in the Red Wall, and you people are trying to smear his name and call him an apologist for foreign regimes who wish us harm. That is absolute nonsense, and I think, frankly, you should be ashamed of yourself for pushing this really horrible narrative.
The principle you have. Just because you're a fanboy of Nigel Farage, you will excuse any nonsense that he says. There is nothing
What did he say? That's nonsense.
There is nothing British, pro-British, about accepting that we somehow provoked him. Putin is a megalomaniac who will invade every country around him given the chance.
Again,
and you should not make any grey area. It is not NATO defending the countries that it defends that has provoked him. He always wanted to do that, and if we didn't have NATO,
Nigel Farage, if you'd actually watched the interview, Benjamin, Nigel said this has given Vladimir Putin and the Russian hierarchy an excuse to turn to the Russian people and say, well, we needed to do this because of NATO's expansion.
Darren, we have to be honest here, which is that Putin simply did not need an excuse in order to invade Ukraine. And we saw actually this quite fascinatingly when Tucker Carlson went and interviewed Putin and he set him up. He asked him this question. He said, why did you do this? Why did you invade? And he was expecting him to give the answer as Farage gave. It's all about NATO. That's actually not what Putin said. Putin gave a warped view of history in which Ukraine does not exist. It literally, there is no Ukrainian people, and therefore it's part of Russia, and therefore Russia can invade. Now, completely factually incorrect, of course. There is a Ukrainian nation. The Ukrainian people deserve their right to self-determination. They deserve to be able to choose their own future. And to suggest suggest anything otherwise, to suggest that their simple fact of showing interest in being part of NATO and being part of the West was enough to justify Putin's action is just completely wrong.
Well, he didn't say that. He said Russia used it as an excuse to justify it. But Ben Leo, do you think actually that we should be more realistic here in the West, and we should accept that there needs to be some form of peace treaty? Because this has gone on for over 2 years. We've spent vast sums of the West's taxpayer sums and military resources, and actually people like Benjamin, dare I say, are being a bit naive on how long this can actually go on for.
Yeah, I think we just need to grow up a bit and learn some nuance in the conversation. It's possible for one thing to exist at the same time as another. Yeah. Putin can be a horrible tyrant, despot, dictator, and he can also, Nigel, can give the assessment that he has a perception that NATO was expanding too close to their borders.
So you do think we provoked him?
Did I say that?
Well, I'm trying to work out what you're just saying.
No, do you know what? I don't know enough about the situation to give comment. So,
and Darren appears to have said that we should not be loyal to Ukraine and defend it in case it goes on for years.
We're not
let me ask you a question.
We're spending billions of pounds as the US is spending tens of billions of dollars.
Yes, but I don't want British people to be dragged into such a thing.
You appear to have just said that because it may go on for many years yet, that should affect whether we want to support them.
No, I'm saying that there needs to be, I think actually Ukraine have been far too digging their heels in and saying we refuse to actually talk to the Russian state about what kind of peace settlement could be negotiated.
Now it's all unravelling. So you think, presumably, that they should give some land over?
I don't know. I don't know what... Believe it or not, I haven't got Putin's WhatsApp.
That people like you, who claim to have a monopoly on patriotism and Western values, actually think that a despot like Putin can invade a neighbouring country and then you should sit down and hand some land over. There is nothing defending about that attitude.
War is going to end?
Exactly. How many people do you want to die?
There is no way this war is going to end without a negotiation that involves some land. We might not like it, we might not think it's the right thing, and we might not think a despot should be able to go in and do that. That's how this war is going to end.
So let's say this war does end in negotiation, and most wars do. Total victory is very difficult. That is a justification for giving as much resource as possible to Ukraine to put them in the best possible position, so that if there is, we do get to that point that we're
hang on, Matthew. Would you have said that about the Vietnam War? Would you have said it should have gone on for as long as it did?
It's not that old.
I mean, this is not a comparable situation.
I think it is, because there were vast sums of money and actually troops being poured into that, and it was a losing battle all along.
Part of the issue with this war from the start has been the fact that Biden was very slow to approve the necessary weapons to give Ukraine a fighting chance against Russia. Eventually he did it, but by the time they got the weapons, they couldn't push back on the fronts. And this kind of unwillingness to go full throttle in support of Ukraine has now left them in a much weaker position, and unfortunately something close to a stalemate. And that is a failure of the West, and it sends a signal to China that we're not there with.
We can't undo the past. We can't undo the past. So where does it go now?
OK, we'll have to leave that one there.
Can I just say?
No, you can't.
We'd rather you didn't.
All right, go for it.
Right. Still ahead, though, after Sir Keir Starmer said he wouldn't use private healthcare, even if his own children were sick. Ben Leo's going to be asking, is the cult of the NHS live and kicking? You're with the Saturday 5, live on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The weather is turning warmer and sunnier during the next few days. There will be some cloudier spells for the next 24 hours or so before high pressure takes a firm hold across the UK and leads to a long settled spell. Now, this weak weather front is just edging into the west of Scotland through the evening, as well as parts of Northern Ireland, some thicker cloud for a time, some patchy light rain and drizzle. That'll tend to sink into northern and western England as well as Wales. Extensive low cloud is expected here, some mist around the hills and coast and some drizzle first thing Sunday. Otherwise, increasingly sunny skies for Scotland, Northern Ireland and for parts of East Anglia as well as the southeast. It's going to feel fresh first thing, but temperatures will rise quickly through the morning because of the sunnier skies. However, we've got that mist around the coast of the southwest as well as parts of Wales, some drizzle over the hills, and that'll take some time to clear up during the morning. Northern England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, increasingly sunny through the day, and with that sunshine we're going to see some higher temperatures compared with much of June so far. But as I say, the mist and low cloud that will be lurking around southwestern shores could take some time to clear, and somewhere like Torbay could keep that fog around the coast through the day. Come inland and skies will brighten nicely by the afternoon, and with sunny spells developing widely, temperatures will reach 25 Celsius in the southeast, 20 to 22 Celsius generally elsewhere. Monday morning starts off with a lot of cloud across western Scotland and Northern Ireland, some patchy rain and drizzle. Elsewhere, another day of warm, sunny spells and increasing temperatures. We're looking at highs on Monday into the high 20s, and by Tuesday and Wednesday, the possibility of 30 degrees.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you. And we won't ever forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five. You'll be very pleased to know there were no fights during the commercial breaks. Now, as always, thank you very much for your messages and your emails. Philip has written in. Good evening, Philip. He says, Farage has always been trying to undermine this country. His comments are outrageous and close to treason. The mask has definitely slipped off. Putin poodle. Philip, I think you need to go pour yourself a nice cold drink and get yourself outside. You need some sunshine. Jackie says Farage is right. Western ideology is too close to the Russian border and Putin doesn't like it. And then Ian has written in and says Ukraine is defending itself against imperial aggression. They deserve our support to the very end. But Chris says, Nigel Farage, speaking the facts, the truth is the politicians in Europe won't accept the cornered Russia had to make a move. Well, that's a range of views there, but I personally would just like people to watch what Nigel Farage actually said.
And also, I was going to say, before the break, the one last point on that is I didn't see the same hysteria when the EU was sending billions and billions of pounds buying gas from Russia, notably Germany, who Donald Trump warned about for many, many years. So, is Russia an enemy or not? If they are, stop buying gas from them.
Very good point. Well, they can it now. They blew up that pipeline. But, Ben, you are going next.
Yes, so I'm sure viewers by now have seen our political editor Christopher Hope's interview with Sir Keir Starmer last night. This is the moment when the Labour leader said he would not go private if he needed, or a loved one needed, healthcare, and instead he would use the NHS.
Pay for private healthcare to effectively jump the waiting list.
Yes.
I wouldn't. I actually had an operation on my knee some years ago. I waited my turn. But the idea of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who is responsible for bringing waiting lists down, then saying to the public, but so far as I'm concerned, I'm going to jump the loop.
But you can afford to. Most people on a good wage do afford it and pay for it.
If I am, elected in to serve as Prime Minister, my job is to bring those waiting lists down, and I'm not going to at the same time say, but for me, I'm going to jump the queue.
So, guys, I don't know what you think about this, but for me, I just can't comprehend why a man with money would choose to clog up an already crippled health service, which is designed for people who need it, who are vulnerable, who are on benefits, why he would choose to use the NHS when he can go private instead of helping other people. What's that about? For me, I interpret that, and many others do, that is a very strange, weird, ideological cult of the NHS, where regardless of anything else, to be so virtuous, you have to use the NHS, even if you can afford to go elsewhere. What's that about?
I mean, I'm desperate to hear what Renee has to say on that, but what I would say is that I don't think this is just isolated to the NHS. I see this on what they're doing to private schools. I see this what they're doing on taxation and refusing to actually be honest about what they're doing there. It's all about class envy and hard left Marxism, and I hate it.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically saying to the world, excuse me, that the NHS is a religion. We worship at its, at its knees, and we would sacrifice our children to prove to you that the NHS is so brilliant that you have to use it. When in actual fact, people who use private medicine take the burden off of the NHS. They take you off of the waiting list. So that's what he should be doing because he can afford it. That's what some people in his party believe, that if you can afford private healthcare, you should have it. West Region has said that they will use private hospitals more to get the waiting list down. So it's a nonsense, but it is a scary
Why does he have this
ideology.
position? Who is he? I don't understand, Benjamin. Maybe you can tell me. Who is he appealing to by saying this kind of nonsense?
Well, as he said in that interview there with Christopher Hope, he thinks that as the person who will ultimately, chances are, be responsible for the health service as Prime Minister, it would be wrong to expect the people who voted him in, the people of this country, to use the NHS if he's not willing to use it himself. And I think that's a principled position.
Well, it's not about not...
Of course, he doesn't have any serious health issues, so he's not clogging anything up. As he said, he's not needed it for some years. But the idea that somebody who is in charge of the funding and the situation and accountable for the NHS wouldn't be willing to use it themselves would be a poor endorsement of the service.
But why is it, Matthew, maybe you can tell me, why is it such a sacrilege from the left especially when people say, I'm going to use private healthcare, I can afford private healthcare? I did. I've got a little anecdote from a few years ago. I had hip surgery in 2018. I thought it was, I think we've got some clips of it here, me trying to recover and learn to walk again. I initially tried to go through the NHS, and in a damning indictment of just how broken it is, they misdiagnosed me with a groin strain. I took 3 months. It took me 3 months to get a consultant's appointment, another 6 months to be referred to physio. And when I did go to physio, they said, "Oh, you got a groin strain. Just here's a sheet of paper. Lift your leg up 6 times a day." I went private, and the very next week, within 6 days, I was under the knife being operated on for hip surgery. That is a stark contrast to the service you receive in the NHS.
And I do feel for the people, millions of people who are stuck on waiting lists and can't do that. I absolutely do. But I do think it's pretty rich to hear that actually the reason they're doing it is because, well, the Prime Minister and politicians have got to prove a point that if they're not willing to use public services, then, why should they accept the public to? But then Diane Abbott and other MPs can send their children to private schools whilst waxing lyrical about how awful grammar schools and all these private schools actually are. You are all hypocrites in the extreme.
Well, no, first of all, that's just a completely other topic. But I think
it's all
perfectly
private.
valid. I think most people in this country, if a Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, for example, Rishi Sunak was criticised for this because he uses private health care. If they were not willing to use the service because it's not good enough, then that tells you something. When politicians are the people responsible for it, if they don't think it's good enough for them, it's not good enough for the people in the country.
This is a complete misjudgment by Keir Starmer. I think for a lot of people, if their child was sick and had a serious illness, they would move mountains to do whatever they can to get them the healthcare that they needed, and they're willing to pay more for it. It's such a two-dimensional perspective that Keir Starmer is doing there. It's such a kind of like a rationing system where we have to imagine if there wasn't enough food around, that the government wasn't giving you enough food, and then you went out and purchased some food privately because you didn't want to get it from the state. Would you think that that would lead to the creation of more food and more food production? That's what private healthcare is. It expands the capacity. And I really worry about the ideology.
What scares me about this is that it says that they're going to be too scared to fix it.
OK, yeah, well, maybe that's it. Still ahead, though, young people are going to court to fight over their inheritance. They want your cash. Should they be concentrating on making their own money, though? You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Princess of Wales has said she's excited by a new report on prioritising early childhood, a cause, as we know, that she's closely associated with.
Yes, the task force findings claim that the UK could reap £45.5 billion in economic benefits if firms prioritise early childhood.
Well, let's talk about this now with our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. Good morning, Cameron.
Good morning.
I suppose it's characteristically Catherine, isn't it, to say she doesn't want to distract from this report by sort of people talking about her health. But we should start probably by saying she said she's not feeling well enough to come and talk about this in public, but sort of saying she's watching it, keeping a close eye from behind closed doors.
Yeah, absolutely. This should not be seen as a return to work by the Princess of Wales, but I have been told she's A, read the report and B, been briefed on it. But this all stems really from her work when she started being a working member of the royal family, where she was working closely with people suffering from addiction, mental health problems. And what she found is all of these issues tend to stem from a poor start in life, so the first 5 years of a child's life. So in January 2023, she set up Shaping Us, this awareness campaign for the early years. 2 months later, she convened the Business Task Force, so 8 members of big businesses across the UK, and over a generation, that could add, as they claim, more than £40 billion to the UK economy each year. We spoke to Peter Grigg yesterday. He's the chair of Home Starts UK, a charity which supports young families. Let's hear what he said about the Princess's role in this.
She's been a real driving force behind the report and everything it's done. And when we've spent time with the Royal Foundation, what it does, it reminds everyone that this is really important work and early childhood matters, that more businesses should get involved, that more charities are out there for people who want to do more to support families and children. So it's been a wonderful experience.
The People's Channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting.
I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frothy in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. As always, thank you very much for your messages about everything we've been debating tonight. Jess has written in, the more Starmer speaks on the media, Jess says, the more he advertises how he's out of touch. Carol says, how is Starmer? Go private. You can afford to. Stop adding to the queue. And Dickie says, is Starmer for real? Even if I believed he would use the NHS to treat a seriously ill family member, does he really think we believe his relative wouldn't be bumped up the queue anyway because of who he is? And then a lot of people are saying, leave Farage alone. We're going to start a hashtag, leave Farage alone. Right, who's going
Well, maybe
next?
he provoked them.
It's me.
It's Renee.
I think I'm the last one.
Dr. Renee, take it away. Oh, I'm a poet and I didn't know it.
So I want to say today that selfish and entitled millennials should not expect to inherit from their parents. So baby boomers are starting to die, and there's a £71 trillion bonus apparently in their wills that they've built up over decades of hard work, scrimping and saving, buying their house, and the millennials that they've raised apparently expect naturally to inherit that. So as they die and leave their money, millennials are taking more and more of their parents' wills to court. In fact, there were 10,000 wills were contested last year compared to half that number in 2016. So why is this happening? Well, lawyers who are working in the field seem to believe it's because this generation of millennials and beyond are the most entitled that there have ever been and feel that they deserve the cash come what may. So little Johnny and Genevieve, that mummy and daddy have worked so hard to give them a better life, to give them a life better than one they had, if they didn't visit enough, they didn't be grateful enough, they didn't respect their parents enough, and then mummy and daddy decide to leave their money to the donkey sanctuary or cousin Jenny from down the road, millennials say, no, that's not good enough, and they're having a strop and they're going to court. So I would say to Johnny and Genevieve, work hard, make your own money, make your own wealth, buy your own assets, and then if mummy and daddy decide to leave you any money, it's a real bonus on top of that. I think it's absolutely despicable that you might take your mum and dad's will to court. It is also disrespectful to their memory. and it's selfish. And actually, I think there should be a law change so that you cannot contest a will unless there is hard and firm evidence of foul play.
Well, I would hope that was already the case, is it not? We'll have to be quite brief on remarks on this one, so I want to make sure everyone gets a bite of the cherry. Matthew?
Look, I go through the principle about respecting the person who's died's will and ensuring that if a parent doesn't want to give their money to their children, they shouldn't be entitled to whatsoever. Although I do think it is slightly problematic here with the way we're framing this, as if it is as easy for millennials as it was for boomers to get as much wealth to build up that same level of nest egg. The reason why so many millennials are so dependent on their parents is because houses are so much more expensive, incomes haven't kept up with that. We've got taxes going up on people who are working. We've got a lot of benefits that have gone to millennials, like the pension triple lock. So millennials aren't in as good a financial position as previous generations were, and I think that's the real underlying problem.
All right, but Ben Leo, people might well be saying to Matthew, less shouting at their television sets. If I don't want to give my kids my own money, I shouldn't have to. Doesn't matter if you've not been, building enough houses for them.
Yeah, I'm probably... see, I was given some financial help by a parent maybe 10 years or so ago. I paid the money back, so it's not quite inheritance. So I was given, a bit of a leg up. However, I just think in life, don't give your power away by relying on other people to help you out. One of the best life lessons I've ever had, and I teach my own children, is don't rely on anyone. Do things yourself, create things yourself.
Your children are 5.
Sorry?
Surely they rely on you.
They do, but I still try and instill in my older one, anyway, the 5-year-old, that don't rely on people. I mean, it's a very valuable life lesson. It's a priceless one. If you're going around relying on inheritance or relying on your employer or relying on your friends or your mother to help you out in life, you're eventually going to come unstuck.
Look, my late grandmother used to say that she was going skiing, which meant spending kids' inheritance. And the older she got, the more she always extremely careful with money, and she, by virtue of being so careful, had managed to build up a decent amount of it. But as she got older, she loved shopping. But it's not... I don't really like the idea of suing your parents. Clearly, that's not great. But the thing is that this is the first generation that is poorer than their parents.
Yeah, that's what Matthew Lesh
and their
said.
expectations are to try and buy a house.
Loads more to come tonight on the show. We'll have to leave that there. We're going to a break. We'll be going to a Kenyan farmer after the break. He's been bashed by the BBC. Find out why.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The weather is turning warmer and sunnier during the next few days. There will be some cloudier spells for the next 24 hours or so before high pressure takes a firm hold across the UK and leads to a long settled spell. Now, this weak weather front is just edging into the west of Scotland through the evening, as well as parts of Northern Ireland, some thicker cloud for a time, some patchy light rain and drizzle. That'll tend to sink into northern and western England as well as Wales. Extensive low cloud is expected here, some mist around the hills and coast and some drizzle first thing Sunday. Otherwise, increasingly sunny skies for Scotland, Northern Ireland and for parts of East Anglia as well as the southeast. It's going to feel fresh first thing, but temperatures will rise quickly through the morning because of the sunnier skies. However, we've got that mist around the coast of the southwest as well as parts of Wales, some drizzle over the hills, and that'll take some time to clear up during the morning. Northern England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, increasingly sunny through the day, and with that sunshine we're going to see some higher temperatures compared with much of June so far. But as I say, the mist and low cloud that will be lurking around southwestern shores could take some time to clear, and somewhere like Torbay could keep that fog around the coast through